So obviously I've given an introduction to what CCA is, where we are. So today we're talking very much, we're talking about the inner development goals and why. So I'm going to make certain assumptions that not everybody is au fait with the inner development goals, and just give a quick introduction. The Sustainable Development Goals were created back in 2015, and after a number of renditions of precursors to those. But around late 2018, the people in Sweden predominantly were realizing that we weren't making that much progress. So then they started thinking, well, what do we need to do apart from the technical stuff? And they created the Inner Development Goals in 2019, I believe, where they thought about all the inner things that we need to do as within ourselves to enable movement to action. And we'll cover a little bit about that in a bit. Key takeaways that we're hoping for from today: expand our own self-awareness of how the IDGs fit in there. Having a way of conceptualizing scenarios from our own pasts, reflections of the past or even the present, which can help us get better and learn from the IDGs and how they can help us going forward. And understand the need of continuous exploration, reflection, and navigation of self in relation to the challenges in our world. So it is a non-for-profit organization. It's, as I mentioned, it's centered in Sweden, but there are people from all over the world, including some of the very big names in psychology, coaching, and industry who are helping out and building that. Plus, and we've got a list of some of the information about that at the end, but there are also different pods around the world which are helping grow that and also feeding back into the group. So what this image is trying to do is demonstrate how the IDG is just almost like a step ladder to help us achieve. So when we think about what the IDGs, the SDGs are, and in this slide I've created a partnership as being a key sort of part of this, because none of this can be achieved without collaboration and partnerships. But that sort of ties into achieving all of these wonderful things. If we understand ourselves and we're aware, that enables us to think better. Now, by the way, this is not a linear process. This is not intended as a linear process, but quite often it's easier to comprehend in that way. And especially if we're trying to share this with other people, it can actually be a useful tool. And obviously, when we understand ourselves, we're able to think better about what our perspectives are and how that fits, particularly with relating, which we're also going to touch on later. So by helping people understand the appreciation for this is one way that this can be used to help us bring the mindset that we can all understand, think together, collaborate, and ultimately act. Because there's a lot of thought processes, a lot of people are thinking, but for all of the intentions without moving that to action, when we do not achieve what we would like to see. So there's just one representation. It's not trying to pretend to be perfect, but it's an indication of how it can be used as a useful, as a metaphor, basically, for thinking. And then we think about, well, what is the journey? So I don't know who here is aware of the 3 horizons model. One or two, yep. Concept here is, if you're thinking, you might as well stick with nature and use the metaphor of walking through the countryside, and we have the hills, and you go over horizon and you think, well, what's behind that horizon? Sometimes you think, oh, I've got to the top of this big long hill. Oh no, there's another peak in front of me. And so this is what this metaphor is trying to use. And the idea is that we see our first horizon, we get over it. And that's the horizon of current days, how we're thinking right now. We haven't seen that there's anything beyond it. And a lot of business and a lot of organizations, and of course, a lot of people are thinking very much in our usual processes, our practices, our business models. The third horizon is more around regenerative leadership and thinking about how we can adapt and be a responsive circular economy or whatever other model we want to use. But where do we want to be as a culture and in an industry and a business and an international community in the future? That's the third horizon. That's when we've gone over the first horizon. We've seen where we want to go. We get to the final bit. Of course, we never ever get there. It's a continuous journey. But quite often, the second horizon is a metaphor for, well, we're at the top of the second hill, but which way are we going? An example of that might be, and I see this in a lot of the world press, particularly the UK. Are they going to put wind farms? Where should we put them? We should put them out at sea. That's not going to impact. But no, we need to, there's the complaints from a lot of the environmentalists, but that's now going to destroy our view out there because we want it to still look pristine. This is an example of where, are we looking left or right? Which way do we go that is the best at the moment from what we know? Or if we stay with the metaphor of walking in the field, are we going to go through a river there that's too deep, too fast flowing, and we're better off going left and finding a bridge? It might be a longer journey, but it's a better one. So this is where the two horizons are, is about trying to just navigate that journey as we go from A to B and not expect it to be a linear journey. Does anybody have any questions, or does that make sense? So Ritu, would you mind sharing the journey?
Yes, Alan. So the three horizons are very relatable in this scenario because we do realize that it's need for us to now work towards the third horizon and see what we can benefit from doing so. And definitely shifting of our focus from horizon one may be very challenging, and it may have to be navigated through transformational leadership and perhaps situational leadership, and also by, say, modeling authentic leadership. And this gap between knowing and doing needs to be reduced in order to for us to go towards or to be working in third horizon so as to attain SDGs by 2030. So yes, a lot of things like reducing the gap between thinking and doing, and also the dissonance of not being able to be same in different situations, not showing up authentically in different situations. Those kind of gaps, if they are reduced in our individual personalities, that could perhaps help. And that is perhaps the space that we are looking at, which is developing of the inner development goals. And perhaps slowing down and unlearning few things that we already know, and also repatterning a few of our beliefs, choices could help us navigate in that direction. So also, I think the living systems, the way they are, instead of our wanting to change them, how about thinking of adding to it and doing what is in our control? So keeping these aspects in mind, if I was to talk about this framework of IDGs, which we see here. So this framework has 5 dimensions and 23 skill sets. Now, as you look at it, I would like you to reflect about the skill sets that you already have and the skill sets that perhaps you're using and are helping you. So take a moment and identify some of these skills in these 5 dimensions, which are being, thinking, relating, collaborating, and acting. So as you do that, I will elaborate a little bit on in fact, all 5 of them, and then we will come back to the being dimension and go deeper into the being dimension. So being is relationship to self, cultivating of inner life and developing and deepening our relationship to our thoughts, feelings, and body to help us be present, intentional, and non-reactive when we face complexity. And this has 5 skills under its umbrella, which are inner compass, integrity and authenticity, openness and learning mindset, self-awareness, and presence. The second dimension is thinking or cognitive skills, which are nothing but developing of our thinking abilities by taking different perspectives, evaluating information, and making sense of the world as an interconnected whole. And this is essential for wise decision making, as we know. And the skills included are critical thinking, complexity awareness, perspective skills. Perspective skills are skills in seeking, understanding, and acting, and actively making use of insights from contrasting perspectives. Sense making is the next one, which is seeing patterns, structuring the unknown, and being able to consciously create stories. And long-term orientation and visioning is the ability to formulate and sustain commitments to visions relating to larger contexts. So as we are going through this, I hope you are evaluating yourself on these skills and seeing where you are. The third dimension is caring for others and the world. Appreciating, caring for, and feeling connected to others, such as neighbors, future generations, or the biosphere, helps us create more just and sustainable systems and societies for everyone. The skills under this are appreciation, to begin with, which is relating to others and to the world with a basic sense of appreciation, gratitude, and joy. The next is connectedness, having a keen sense of being connected with and being a part of larger whole, such as a community, humanity, or global ecosystem. Humility is the next skill, which is being able to act in accordance with the needs of the situation without concern of one's own importance. Empathy and compassion are abilities to relate to others, oneself, and nature with kindness, empathy, and compassion, and address related suffering. The fourth dimension is collaborating. These are the social skills. To make progress on shared concerns, we need to develop our abilities to include, hold space, and communicate with stakeholders with different values, skills, and competencies. And to do this, we need to develop 5 of these skills, which are communication skills, co-creation skills, inclusive mindset, and intercultural competence, which means willingness and competence to embrace diversity and include people and collectives with different views and backgrounds. The next skill is trust, which is ability to show trust and to create and maintain trust relationships. And the last under this dimension is mobilization skills, which are skills inspiring and mobilizing others to engage in shared purposes. The last dimension is acting, which is nothing but the action or enabling change, which means qualities such as courage and optimism help us acquire true agency and to be able to bring change, breaking of old patterns, generating original ideas, and acting with persistence in uncertain times is needed. And the skills that come under this dimension are courage, creativity, optimism, and perseverance. So I invite you to share your thoughts if you would like to at this point. Alan, would you want us to take a break here, or should we move further and take it a little later? Or
I'll put that. It's a great question. It's a question to the crowd. Does anybody have anything that they would like to share? Could be yourself. Back to that question, it could be yourself. It could be an observation of something that you need or you see. By the way, we would sometimes do breakout rooms. I'm not sure if the numbers here are sufficient, but we can do if you would like to break. Anybody wants to go into breakout rooms? Don't see anybody jumping for that one.
So should we then dive deeper into the being dimension?
Sounds good.
And see how that unfolds for everyone. So coming back to being dimension, this dimension, as we know, explains the need of continuous exploration, reflection, and navigation of self in relation to the challenges of the real world. And this is very close to my heart because I see myself reflecting very often, say, checking in with myself every morning, every night, and seeing, who am I being? And am I being the person that is in congruence with my inner cores and values? And am I bringing my whole self to all my situations, whether it's at work or at home? And I see myself continuously navigating myself in situations where I'm challenged and where I find it challenging to be, at my positive best. So to be able to think within and to be able to check oneself and respond with that awareness helps in our beingness. And in leadership, this is a very highly rated quality. So self-systemic and present moment awareness in personal and professional systems is something that can help us navigate all situations positively. And when one does that, the butterfly effect of self-transformation, as they say, if there is a transformation happening in some part of the country, its ripple effects are felt perhaps in some other corner of the world. So I do see the ripple effects of my transformation and my journey in people around me, whether it's in my personal or my professional life. So having said that, in teams, as in the previous session, Alan and Cherry had brought out that there is no I in the team, and we all work for a win-win situation. And if we are not mindful of our being, and if we react to something the way we are not favorably acting to, that can also have adverse effects on a lot of things, especially in team dynamics. So going to the next slide, Alan. Self-awareness is a major part of this dimension, which is relation to self. And this quote is from Harvard Business Review's Emotional Intelligence series. I have a set of the series with me, and it's a very simple read, and it very clearly establishes a link between IDGs and beingness. So if you can, I'll request you rather to go through them. These are very small books, and I found them to be very useful. So coming to the next slide. Now, leaning into one's core self to create positive identity is what is required. So for us to, first of all, operate from knowing what our values are and what our strengths are, and being able to check our beliefs and assumptions, and then, if needed, working towards building that piece of our identity, which is perhaps not known to us and not known to the others, and realizing that there is a possibility of building that part and working towards that part of our identity can help bring a lot of transformational outputs to all leadership roles at all levels. And as I said, questioning existing values and beliefs and reflecting on accountability to not just the accountability concept, but also to taking it to the responsibility level. So what I mean by this is that we do tick mark all we check boxes and our Excel sheets, and we fulfill all criteria that are needed to be done, and we feel that we've done our share of responsibility. But in team dynamics, if one can go beyond that and take responsibility, which is beyond just those tick boxes, and take that responsibility and work at a deeper level, that is someone who's working towards creating that positive identity and going that extra mile. So coming to the next slide, Alan. So I invite you to now reflect on this framework. This framework, let's see how it speaks to you. So this again talks about self-regulation being an important part of our relationship with the planet. So if one is able to regulate one's thoughts, aspirations, one's energy is taken care of, and overall, responsibility towards self and others, and consciousness towards self and others is balanced. So what are the thoughts that you have when you see this framework? Sometimes in pursuit of our goals, we don't realize that we may be having detrimental consequences on others. And we continue to pursue ruthlessly our individual goals without balancing the multiple needs of other stakeholders. So what I mean by aspirations here is checking in with our aspirations. So relating this to the IDG framework and the beingness of that framework. Do you see some connection here? So then some of the questions to ask ourselves and also during leadership development can be, are we living integrated lives? Are we able to balance our extrinsic and intrinsic motivations? In order to sustain high levels of motivations in teams and simultaneously keep one's life in balance or harmony is critically important in today's challenging world. And it is critically important to know what motivates our team members. So Alan, can we have the participants reflect on this? Should we invite them to share their thoughts if they want to?
Would you like me to stay on the previous slide for this, or?
Yes, so yeah, we can be on the slide with my productive reflections from the connection of IDG frameworks and the beingness and the self-awareness piece. So coming to the question, what kind of support team do I have? How can my support team help me be a more authentic leader? How should I diversify my team to broaden my perspective? So would anybody like to share their thoughts with us? Or would anybody like to share what's coming up for them? Let's hear the other voices. So do we have something in the chat box?
Or talk? Maybe I'm happy to start off.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm thinking about this, it reminds me of a situation I was in quite a few years ago where I was a leader and a project manager. Rather than a coach, and just trying to get the previous slide is also sort of like the responsibility. Sorry, I'm just going to go back to the previous slide just for a second. Yeah, the consciousness and almost competing against the responsibility in a way for me at the time. Because I was not being able to myself with the responsibility and what I was perceiving. I was actually really fortunate. I was working on a project and managing a project where there was one particular player in the team who was so confident in her own ability that wasn't able to give any sharing of what she was doing, and it left a risk that we had a big fallover if anything went wrong. The challenge was that this is myself earlier in my career, I felt under the responsibility was to get that information from her. But it was actually for some support team I had was actually one of my colleagues who pointed out, hey, get to know her. Get to know yourself first and how you are behaving, and then you'll be able to. And it was a really good little tip to be able to think in myself, how am I acting? How am I behaving? That is stopping me getting that synergy between myself and this colleague in actually enabling us to get the good outcomes that were needed, and safety valves, safety checks that we had from her providing insight earlier on. And I think that was a very good step in my journey in this, that self-realization. And I think there's a lot of and I see that often now in leaders at any level. That self-defense, those almost competing things, because we're not feeling comfortable letting ourselves go and be vulnerable, which is part of the being. That was my own perspective. And so my support team was my colleagues, my fellow consultants, who are able to give me on request that feedback of, oh, perhaps. And that helped me build that and enable it outwards. Does anybody have anything else?
Thank you for sharing that, Alan. Yes, we do have AJ Tenant from Sydney sharing. I don't get his name. It's an abbreviation there. I apologize for not being able to pronounce it correctly. So he says, I work for myself. I need to find the support team outside of work.
Yeah. So I know for me that it's both leaning on people in my co-work group and in my family and partners I work with, but then also knowing where to draw a line and not to lean on my wife too much with that, and having boundaries and being conscious of that. So that comes back to being mindful and reflective on who I'm talking to about what, and reaching out for help, and making sure I get the support that I need without, I guess, blurring boundaries or oversharing, those sorts of challenges.
Thank you for that. That's a challenge we all face in today's time. And well, my thoughts on that would be that, yes, what is in our hands is what one we can do best. And like you said, that you work for yourself, so that is in your hands and in your control. But beyond that, finding a support system is perhaps not so easily controllable. It's a long ride, a long task, and be it in professional or personal setting, a lot of work needs to be done there too. So, well, that's what is coming up for me when you share that. And Andy shares, enjoying the conversation so far. We'll have to watch the rest of this recording later. So Andy had to leave, and Ramnath is very happy to connect with the others and other peers who really want to support other teams. He's looking forward to more collaborations. And I have a dear friend, Paramjeet, who says, happy to connect, looking forward to further deliberation and collaboration, like the perspective. And Rakshit says, I work with different cohorts in different parts of my life. Hence, for me, it is more working with equal allies who are the support network. That's wonderful. Thank you, Rakshit. Thank you for sharing that. Well, that's a nice way of, looking at, connecting this to the dimension of collaboration and social skills. Perhaps those of us who have not thought of it, we can now think of getting those skills for ourselves under the fourth dimension. All right. So, Alan. Oh, so this slide is for me. From the self-awareness framework that I shared previously, which was a breakdown of self-awareness piece. Now, that was more to do with oneself. And now this is broadening our horizon and letting us open up to, being connected, experiencing the oneness of humanity. So here there are two sides to this framework. The side on the left, as you see, is more to do with self again, where if we are able to regulate ourselves, and if we are able to build our one-on-one connection with the earth and just do what is in our control, we will probably be doing the best that we can. And by doing so, we will be contributing in our own small way towards a truly regenerative and sustainable future. Whereas if we were to come on the framework on the right-hand side, which is conscious social responsibility, now here, if we see the interconnectedness of how consciousness, responsibility, and self-regulation from the angle of thinking collectively, and from the lens of, say, thinking in terms of sustaining people's processes and planet. How does this speak to you? The collective framework, which is going to enable regeneration and regenerative. The word regenerative means to regrow, to renew, and restore. So if we look at our planet Earth, if we were to make it go beyond sustainability, make it regenerative, which is able to regrow, which is able to renew and restore, which it already is doing, and it's very good at doing that. But with the current scenario where there is a climate emergency and where we feel disconnected more than ever before socially, keeping that as the context, if we were to reflect on this framework on the right, how does this speak to you?
Can you explain me a little bit more about self-regulation, which is very different from right and left?
Sure. So on the left, Aya, self-regulation, we see it as work on ourselves, and the work that one needs to do. If we were to relate self-regulation with IDG framework and those 23 skills that we need to try and get for ourselves, we may have acquired a few skills, and the remaining skills we may take very long to acquire, but we can start somewhere. So once we start, working on ourselves, working on our inner dimensions, so the transformational journey that we will take towards making our planet sustainable and everything around us sustainable. So here on the left-hand side, it is our one-on-one relationship. So what is in our control? And on the right-hand side, when we look at the broader framework, this is where we can think of, once we've worked on ourselves, we can also simultaneously think of working collectively and, with oneness, so that together we can achieve larger goals. And the right section of the framework talks about the collaborating skill and the acting skill where action is required towards our positive progress towards achieving SDGs. So does that explain or give you some clarity between the distinction? Rakshit, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah. Hi. I think for me, it is like when you talk about self-regulation, like how to move from thought to action. And I think for me, it is about, so what's my frame of reference? What can be a better role model than the Earth itself, and how it functions from a billion years if you look at how old the Earth is, and how it has gone through a constant change and a metamorphosis of across different time zones, different eras,
Absolutely.
or the geological timescales. So I think in today's context is also about how the collective sustainable. I'm not sure, because what are we sustaining from? Because it is, you talked about climate change, but because climate change is also about the limit, like how the resources are being limited and is getting overused. But I think I prefer to focus on the regenerative part. How do you keep it thriving and in a constant cycle of restoration and renewal? And that's why for me, I kind of remember the Gaia's hypothesis written pretty like 100 years back, I guess, by James Lovelock. So that's what I wanted to share. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rakshit, and thank you for bringing your, your perspective. And though, of course, it is coinciding with what I have here in terms of, being able to regenerate and,
as you mentioned, the Earth's metamorphosis over geological eras. I'm reminded of Pangaea theory of movement of tectonic plates resulting in the movement of continents. And of course, planet Earth survived this in the past and will continue to do so.
So, yes, the sustainable piece is more to do with how we look at things, we look at our behaviors and our inner responses to situations. So at times, I mean, it's with respect to everything actually, but more to do with our inner dimensions, where how we can, keep ourselves in a state of well-being and also others in a good state if we are able to regulate and sustain a positive behavior and reduce the gap between our thoughts, words, and actions, and have those self-regulatory practices to be able to check ourselves. So that's where this is coming from. Would you like to add something, Rakshit?
No, thanks. I think for me, the IDGs is like also, I think it's a very easy to follow framework. It doesn't require too much of intellectual power. I think it exists within us. I think every human being on the planet, I think just like awakening them either through self-awareness or through some kind of like a group energy, like a synergistic approaches. Like when you said the ripple effect, for example, when you see something happening in some part of the globe, it always creates effects and influences on other people to do the similar or maybe something on the same lines. I think, Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for your perspective again. Thank you. Really appreciate. So, Alan, can we move ahead? Yes, there is another question. Thank you.
I noticed, Ramnad, you've got your hand up, your digital hand. Do you have something you'd like to share?
Yeah, thanks, ma'am, for this wonderful presentation. This is really good to know that the self-regulation from the Mother Earth planet, how it will be really reflecting our day-to-day life. Just I want to share the live example of how we can connect the IDGs to reflecting these things to the climate changes. Just one example, because I'm looking at perspective of the scientific things that is happening.
Mhm.
So when the earth is cool, we have three to four seasons: rainy seasons, winter, summer, and all these things. It is not constant. It's not sustaining itself. It is obviously it is changing, right? So that the thing is, but even the earth is self-regulating. It is continuously revolving on its own axis, and every year we are seeing these four seasons at the same time. We are not changing it. The time with respect to the time, it is not changing. So whenever we felt it, okay, the spring season will come in this area. So definitely we are waiting for the springs. The rainy season will come in this season. So the farmers and everybody has looking for the crops to be yielded in this period. So obviously the earth is self-regulating its own way of doing the pathway, right? And second thing is it has been influenced. Now, if you look at the shift of the paradigm shift that
Mhm.
has been happening, and the climate is going to be changed, and obviously we need to be worried why the seasons have been changed suddenly. We are looking for in the June, the rainy season has to come, but is not yet coming. The drought is coming now, and all these factors are being changed because of the influence of some other factors. This makes us to be more awareness, and that's why we are looking into the responsibilities coming into the picture. Until then, we are not taking any responsibility because it is being taken by self-regulations by the earth itself. But when the impact, the causes and impact, if you look at these two factors, there are two sides of the coin. When the cause is there, definitely there is an impact. So people will come and questioning themselves why this is happening. All these things comes into the picture. So definitely the responsibility will get increases. Self-reliance will be get increases. Consciousness will get increases. So, and it is not by the single human being. It should be, it's not by IDGs or the single human being that even he is having certain thoughts and factors, but it is a group of people has to come into the action. The group of people should have the same platform of the thoughts. If that is not happening, then there is no resilience that has been coming out from this. So the two parts which you are shown on the left and right side, both are like cause and effect. I can see that is the two faces of the coin. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramnath. So that's how you look at this framework. And
Yeah.
The endeavor was to let all of you have your own thoughts looking at IDG's framework. And this framework is conscious self-responsibility framework is an evolving one. It's being taken to sessions like this and also in individual coaching sessions. And I am yet to a kind of, come to a kind of fixed aspect of this framework. And I feel that it needn't be fixed at this point because it's only post this research one can probably, if need be, do something about it. Otherwise, it's an open tool for anyone to explore. So having said that, once again, thank you for your thoughts. And Corina,
I
are you
noticed-
there?
Mhm.
For me, the question was because we have different kind of let's say interacting areas in this collective sustainable areas. What is mentioned on the rights model? So we have between consciousness and responsibility, between responsibility, self-regulation, consciousness, and self-regulation. And I wonder, because they are just named collective sustainable, but maybe they differ. Because there are different relations. So yeah.
So where I was coming from, Corina, is on the framework on the left-hand side was regeneration and sustainable aspects with respect to my own self. How I can sustain my behavior or my aspirations and my actions, my thoughts, beliefs, how they can be aligned to my being and presence, so that, you know, I'm able to sustain my energy. I'm able to take care of my wellness, my work, my family. And doing all of that, while doing all of that, also being able to contribute towards, in some way, in a very small way though, but in some way towards, doing good. And that will in some way be contributing to the larger ocean of goodness. So that is where regenerative, sustainable, those two aspects are needed for our own self also. And coming to the framework on the right-hand side, for me, it was with respect to the larger context, where collectively we could think of doing things. And as I said, all of us are open to, explore how this speaks to us, or how the IDG framework speaks to us going forward. So may I request Alan to now go to the next slide. And so summing it up now by saying that self cannot be understood unless we see self as a part of the system. And so the previous framework, now it's the relation between the two. And it's very important that we see ourselves as a part of the larger, collective humanity. So going to the next slide, Alan. Now we are coming back to the inner development framework. And now we'd like your thoughts on how you see this. And if you had the awareness of this framework in your previous scenarios, I'll invite you to reflect on how you would have responded differently if you could pick one situation from the past, or if you'd like to pick a situation in the future. And if you were to imagine using these skills, how would these skills help you in your future situations? So I leave you with these thoughts. And please feel free to share them if you wish to.
I'm reflecting, I'll start off, and I'm obviously keen to hear other thoughts. I'm reflecting on that, the other image, and how I see the Venn diagram that we had, the three images, fits in this. For me, I see it as the being is our consciousness, but our responsibility sort of overlaps into our a few of those areas, actually. I just see them all overlapping because the critical thinking and the complexity awareness sort of play into my perception of the extra dimension. Sorry, I'm going to be cheeky and just go back a couple of slides. It's like the self-regulation is possible when we can see, it's like a feedback cycle, when we can see what is happening and what we're doing. And so the consciousness helps us manage that in every way, from our own individual level to, but also to what we are doing. And responsibility is almost like the measure for me in this. So when we go back to this slide, I had to do a reminder, and I'm happy to do that if anybody else wishes to. It sort of plays across this, so the inner compass being the responsibility, the openness and learning mindset plays a lot into the like the feedback cycle. It's like, what is happening because of that? And the sense making feeds into this. So I feel that this it's almost like a mesh feeding into the open-mindedness. If we're willing to open our minds to the learning that the other things can bring in. I don't know if that makes sense, but that was just a brain dump of how I see these complementing each other, to see the picture, to see how we can adapt. And back to the second horizon, it's the same sort of thing. It's like, well, where are we? Which way do we think makes sense now? By being open-minded, back to the being. Yeah, that's my take. What does anybody else have anything that they would like to share?
So, Alan, I see how you were able to map consciousness, self-regulation, and responsibility into the skills on this framework. And I also have seen from your previous sessions how you were able to interlink the 5 dimensions with the broader skills. And I remember that slide, which was beautiful, and how it explained that they're all interrelated. So, the skills that are here, in some way they are interrelated, and they could be existing at any given point of time with us in some proportion, but may also vary from time to time. So that was beautifully brought out by you. So being mindful of time, should we wrap up the session now by this quote? It is our collective and individual responsibility to preserve and to tend to the world in which we all live. This is a beautiful quote by the Dalai Lama, and we leave you with this thought.
Thank you very much, Ritu. That's beautiful. And just one last thing I'll do, just in case anybody's aware, there's the IDG hubs that you can connect to. If you go into the Inner Development Goals website, there's links to those in there. And they're across different countries and regions. I'll stop my screen share there. Say, well, thank you very much. It's very insightful. And thank you, everybody, for your contributions. I think the conversation there was so rich. And thank you for being vulnerable as well as sharing. Is there anything that